the key thing that we tell everybody, and we have had some good ideas come in here, is how are you going to get to your customer? That's the question. And a lot of people want to talk about the product and how it's going to solve a problem. It's a big problem, and they have a solution. And the question they're trying to avoid, if you can't answer that, that's where you need to start. How are you going to reach your customer? Because it's magic, right? You either have money, you have contacts, or you seriously have invented something that the news is going to come down and tell the world about. I've invented anti-gravity. Great. You don't need marketing. The world will be the door to your, be the path to your door. Outside of that, you better know how to reach your customer.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, David Schneider. And David started his journey going into engineering because he came from a family of engineers, and then got into writing software for a financial services industry. And then after that started working at GE, and then went into software research and development, learned how to invent new things, and deployed the world's first handheld medical prescription device at the time. Went on to a research position, Therapeutics, a startup company, and then after that went into a vehicle entertainment startup before transitioning to doing his own business, which is what he's doing today. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, David.
It's a great introduction. Thanks. Could have definitely not have done that well myself. Really, thank you for letting me have the time here.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on. So I just took a much longer journey and condensed it into the 30 or 45-second version of it. But why don't we rewind and unpack a little bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started going into engineering?
Sure, sure. So I'm out here in Phoenix. I grew up here. Family moved out here and bought horse property. We didn't have any horses. They just wanted horse property for some reason. I mean, I had a lot of room to roam in our yard. Went to high school here. Went to ASU. As you alluded to, my whole family was engineers. My dad was a double E, and I learned a lot from him, as well as school and working on my own stuff. And it was instructional and informational for learning about real world problem solving, because a lot of what he did was very, real world stuff. So yeah, like you said, I went into engineering. I had a PC in junior high. It was my passion. Taught myself opcode, assembly language, wrote games. We all played them. Uh, that led us off, and then kind of just kept going into it. It wasn't actually my plan in college to be an engineer, though. I was going to be a lawyer, but it was my passion about it, and the fact that, like you said, I was trying to make a lot of money actually doing this while I was in college, and I thought, I don't know why I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to do what I really love every day. So that led me here.
That was jumping over a bit of the journey. So let's rewind and unpack it a bit. So,
Sure.
Started out engineering, and then I think after graduating, you went into writing software and then working for GE. Is that right?
No, actually, I was writing software while in college
Okay.
at 19. Yeah. So, and I was making, good money. And then actually, there was another company that wrote software for power companies like APS, Arizona Public Service, and Salt River Project, actual utilities. And they were writing software management software for them. And I went in to help them out. And, excuse me. Um, they paid me a lot more. And I was one of their top engineers very quickly. And I'm like, this is clearly a good career path. The lawyer thing's going to go on the wayside, because I just love doing this anyway. Um, and so I went through all of that. I went to actually I did go to a startup before GE. I actually had my own startup where we wrote communication software. And it did faxing, paging, it did a whole bunch of different things all at once. It was for small and medium-sized businesses, and it was my first startup, and it was my first time I realized our software was awesome because we had a support call one night, and it's my passion. I was there all day, all night, and it got escalated all the way to me, and we were trying to figure out what was going wrong with this customer. And it was the Puerto Rican Sewer and Water Authority. They had over 400 people in the field using it, like 50 people. It was 450 people or so using this software that was designed for a small, medium-sized business of 20 or less. And I'm like, we're writing really good software. It isn't supposed to even work for this scale. Um, so that was my first startup. That software actually that startup was acquired. I mean, I didn't make a lot of money. I mean, it was my first one by what was then Packard Bell and NEC, I believe. I think that was the corporation name. It was some odd one at the time. But yeah, that was my first experience. Then I went to GE.
Mm.
So kind of a little interlude there of having some entrepreneurship and that level of fun of, oh, there's an exit. There's a big bonus at the end of this.
So now what made you, because I mean, going from almost a startup, which is, on the small end, to GE,
Yep.
which is a huge company, what made you decide to kind of switch gears or go in that direction?
Well, it was actually a decision. I wanted to experience real corporate world, and at the time, GE was either the first or second largest company in the world. It was near their nadir, and I was very young, and I thought, man, being a software engineer at one of the biggest companies in the world has got to be an eye-opening experience. So let me try that. So that's why I went there. I just wanted to have that corporate experience, and it actually taught you a lot. For the very first time in my life, I'm sitting in a meeting as an engineer, hearing the 2 weeks, the 3 month, the 6 month, and I'm like going, oh, this is a lot of planning here. 12 month, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and I'm like, ooh, this is a lot of planning. This is really good thinking. This is how you really budget at scale here, right? And plan things out. So it was actually a phenomenal experience. They had it at least at the time, amazing internal training programs too. I was in training probably a third of the time I was there, just taking internal courses. So it was a great move at that time.
So now you make the move and you go from kind of the startup into what would be a much larger business, and you work for GE. And how long were you at GE for?
So I was there for about a year. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, there's this other company. It's a medium-sized company, and they're looking for engineers." And it was in Tucson, Arizona. And I was married, and we were looking for a little bit of a change. So I went down there and I interviewed, uh, and great friend still, they offered me a certain amount of money, and he goes, "Well, that's not that much more than you're making now." He said, "Give them a number that you actually want, and see if they'll pay you." And so I gave them a number. The next thing I know, they gave me that number, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm moving to Tucson then. Cool."
Hmm.
And that was that part of my journey. I just went down, we moved, we bought a house. It was pretty fun. I hadn't intended on leaving GE, but I'm like, for at the time, like 30% more money. See ya.
So now, no, it makes sense. And, it's kind of, you got to be careful what you wish for, or what you ask
Yep.
for, so to speak, that if you ask for it and they give it to you, then you have to follow through, or at least you should
Yep.
follow through. And
You
so,
should.
so now you did that. And then I think from there, you went into a bit of software R&D and inventing new
Yeah.
things, and kind of found out that was a little bit of where your drive and your passion was, or things that you enjoyed.
Yeah. So when I went to the company down in Tucson, initially they were just doing corporate software as an independent firm and doing a very good job of it. But they were acquired by a larger corporation that turned them into an R&D center, bought us an entire building. Um, I think it was like 25,000 square feet or something. And we're going to hire a bajillion new people. And that was super exciting because it was software R&D. We dreamt up stuff and invented new mousetraps, none of which had any commercial use really, except in very long-term vision planning. Might have fit more, GE's R&D kind of concepts. Uh, and that's kind of but it was so fun because that's where we actually developed the very first handheld e-prescribing system. Was as an R&D effort,
Hmm.
can we do this on existing handheld devices? And turns out we can, and did. And so that was that part of that journey. Though eventually the corporate company, I will get the full disclosure here, the corporate parent eventually saw this gigantic burning hole in Tucson that was costing them, I think, a net of about 21 million annually. Because again, we were just inventing stuff, and they didn't understand the IP value, and so they did do a shutdown. It was a it was a process. Everybody got offers at other jobs. I mean, they were all good engineers. They all got offers somewhere else or severance or anything. It went well, but they did shut it down, and that moved me on to my next stage of back into kind of corporate, because I took their offer and moved to LA, and now I was in California, and I was back in corporate and writing corporate software for people.
Hmm. So now you do that, and you say, okay, get into that, decide this is an area that you love and enjoy. You kind of continue to live in that world. And I think at one point you got into handheld medical prescription devices and kind of introduced that to the world, or developed
Right.
that. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we had done is we had developed that as an R&D project in Tucson,
Mm.
right? And we had done a beta test of it. We're shut down. And there's all sorts of rules around that about the IP and whatnot. But I was very direct. I said, we have this thing that I actually think has commercial use cases. Can I shop it out? And they told me, you have to wait a period, do your work in LA, but then you can start shopping it. So about a year later in LA, I started shopping it around. And it turned out this is exactly what you just said. There was a startup in San Francisco. And you know what they wanted to make? Handheld prescribing software. And I said, I have something for you, gentlemen. And I went up and demoed it. And they said, we need that. And I said, you can license it. And by the way, I'll come along for the ride to help you out. And so I went again from corporate back into a startup, extremely well funded startup. And that is where we did a real, not beta, but a true, honest, we started deploying it nationally, the handheld prescribing system. Pretty fun. Pretty fun.
Sounds like it was a fun time and a great experience. Now, from that, I think before you started your own thing, you also got into a vehicle entertainment startup, or kind of switch gears from more of the medical aspect to a different industry.
Yeah, I did do vehicle infotainment for a while. We did some very state of the art work. Um, it was a difficult startup, not because of the technology or anything else, but it's a very consumer focused area, and it's not what anything I had done. Right, I had done corporate, we had done sales to businesses. I had never done consumer facing before, so the tech was good. We did some shows, we did demos to a number of tier one companies, and I ended up selling that IP off. So it never became a commercial success from the perspective of that, but we did sell the IP off. And from there, then I went back into like you just said, back into medical, uh, because there's a bit of a passion there. So I went back into medical at a more medical research level. So that's what I've been had done for a good decade.
Hmm. So now walk us through. So you went back, you did that for a period of time, or
Yep.
went back and, back and forth a little bit between medical and other industries.
Yep.
And then you decided to kind of go in the direction on your own, or to, in other words, go and start your own business or do your own startup, and kind of
Yeah.
mentoring, counseling, giving coaching and other guidance for a lot of people doing startups. So walk us through a little bit of how you made that jump or transition to what you're doing today.
Sure thing. So again, I went back to medical. Long story short, deep research, oncological therapeutics, a lot of deep science, fun stuff, very complex. Exposure on vendor relationships at scale, petabyte scale stuff, and lots of management of large groups, cross-functional groups of deep science also. And left there and said, it's time to take my own journey, take everything I've learned across all of this, small companies, startup from zero, startup from, oh, you've got some serious funding, startup in the medical space, startup in the device space. Like, this is a pretty good help. helping block I can go offer. Found a a partner, and that kind of is complementary. It fits on the other side, the business development, finance side, and said we can help people. So we opened up what we call an incubator here. Frankly, we're going to kind of rebrand it to what we really do. Nobody incubates. Two companies have incubated here, but really, what people come to us for is essentially fractional executive services for a startup in either tech, business development, operations, or finance. So
Hmm.
that's where we are now, because that's really where we shine. We can go in and probably save you. We have saved at least two of our clients over $180,000 in single conversations and mistakes they were going to make, either because of how they were setting up, RSOs or tech decisions they were going to make, all sorts of reasons.
No, sounds like it's been a fun journey and a fun place to be able to help a lot of the businesses. So now as we kind of catch up to where you're at today, and give us an idea. So you say you're kind of honing in on where you really want to focus on and what you're doing. So where do you see kind of the next 6 to 12 months headed for you guys, or where do you see that going?
That's a great question. So we're getting engaged. Our Phoenix is known for being a non-startup, startup, non-startup type of area. Like, there are a lot of tech people here. It's a great city. It's a big city, but it doesn't have that sense of community that, like, even in Austin might have, or even in Miami Beach, and certainly not Silicon Valley. But it's getting there. And so through our connections and networks, and it's kind of gelling into a couple areas. Uh, we're at least becoming known as people you can come to with some very specific needs, right? I need to take us from here, we're launch, product, beta, to the next stage. Architecturally, what do we need to do? How do we scale this? On the tech side, and on the finance and business development side, okay, this is your story. Does that match what you're building? How are you going to get there from a journey perspective? What's the story you're telling that makes this compelling, right? To get to that A round. So
Hmm.
that's our next 6 to 12 months. That's literally our plan, next 6 to 12 months.
No, sounds like it's going to be an exciting time and a fun time to continue to grow the business and go in the direction or provides growth as well as enjoyment. So, well, now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey and even looking at a bit into the future, it's always a great time to transition to the two questions I always love to ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to
Sure.
those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
So the worst decision I ever made was actually in the in-car vehicle infotainment system. We had put together phenomenal tech. We had demoed it. We actually built out two demo cars, not built the cars, but put the systems into cars. We had a local installer that loved us. They actually did it, right? So they knew that it was like a doable thing. Everything was tight. We then took it, presented it to angels. We had one angel that was ready to come in. We told them the numbers. We said, this has got to be 1.5 million. I know it's a lot, but we have to hit the ground running, marketing and selling this.
Hmm.
That's where the money's going. And got a call, said, I can't do it. It's too big a risk. And instead of saying, that's it, I'm out, I went forward anyway, knowing I could not fund it completely myself. Biggest mistake ever. If you have written down a budget and you know what your product and how to get to them and you know what the number is, that's the number. Don't pretend it isn't. It's just, there's no way around it. So that's my biggest baddest decision.
No, it makes perfect sense, and it's one of those things where, you go along and you think, oh, we'll figure it out later down the road,
Mm-hmm.
or we'll come up with the money, or hey, we'll bootstrap it, or we'll reduce funds. And yet then you get into the situation where you're farther down the road, you still don't have the funds you need, and then it compounds the problem as opposed to solving it. So definitely an understandable mistake, but a good one to learn from.
Yeah. Yep.
Now,
For sure.
second question I like to ask is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
The the key thing that we tell everybody, and we have had some good ideas come in here, is how are you going to get to your customer? That's the first. That's the question. And a lot of people want to talk about the product and how it's going to solve a problem. It's a big problem, and they have a solution. And the question they're trying to avoid, if you can't answer that, that's where you need to start. How are you going to reach your customer? Because it's magic, right? You either have money, you have contacts, or you seriously have invented something that the news is going to come down and tell the world about. I've invented anti-gravity. Great. You don't need marketing. The world will be the door to your, be the path to your door. Outside of that, you better know how to reach your customer.
Mm. No, and I think that, sometimes you get excited with the potential of the product or the technology or the other things that, are fun and are, that do make it exciting. And yet you never think about, hey, what is the market, or how are we going to access the market, or otherwise reach them, or make this a successful product. And even if you have a really cool product, you also have to think about reaching the customer and where that is and how you're going to get to it. So I think that's definitely a great piece of advice and a great takeaway. Well, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Honestly, the best way is my email at 3 to 60. It's david.s@3to6060.com. The number 3, the word 2, and then 60.com.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, support a great business. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So
absolutely.
With that, thank you again, David, for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with your patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, David, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the time. It was fun.